It has been written and repeated that the ancient Egyptians accepted the domination of the Ptolemaic and Roman rule, that they had willingly changed their religious beliefs into Christianity, and a short time later, they willingly accepted Islam as a substitute for Christianity. Yet this does not make sense at all, for we know that when countries are invaded, many people leave. So what really happened to Egypt and the Egyptians after the pharaohs? Academia tells us that in the first millennium, there was a sudden increase in population in sub-Saharan Africa of a highly civilized people who energized the whole area. But who are these newcomers? And where did they come from? And where did they go? Several bronze items were found in present-day Nigeria. It is noteworthy to highlight that there are and were no copper mines in these areas, which indicates that the material was imported from a distance. The method of casting bronze statues in West Africa is distinctly Egyptian. According to Mustafa, academia did not take the trouble to think, evaluate, and come to a rational conclusion. Instead, they went haywire, guessing that the newcomers were originated from Israel, Yemen, Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Persia, Canaan, any place but Egypt. Yet none of these cultures possessed the detailed characteristics of the newcomers. Only the ancient Egyptians matched all the characteristics. A prominent writer of West African history who linked the Egyptians to the Yorubas was Jonathan Lucas. He was a former pastor of St. Paul's Church in Lagos, Nigeria. Lucas discusses the various forms of spirits, gods, and ancestors worshipped by the Yorubas. He argues that these same deities were worshipped in ancient Egypt. Furthermore, Lucas believes that ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, emblems, symbols, and formulae have survived in West Africa. He claims that some of the survivals are traced back to different periods of ancient Egyptian history. Firstly, the pre-dynastic period, and secondly, the dynastic period. Lucas notes that the survivors are still in use, especially in the form of a metaphysical outlook on life. With regards to language structure, Lucas points at certain words that survive in pronunciation and in meaning in both Egyptian culture and among the Yorubas. The Egyptians and the Yorubas use the word ku or aku to mean death. For example, he says that the Yoruba believe that every human being possesses a ku or aku, which in Yoruba means he or she dies. In ancient Egypt, ku meant to give up one's spirit. Due to colonization, the Yoruba language has been diluted, but in its much purest form, you will find plenty of pronunciations and words that mean the same in ancient Egypt. Language is very important. It is the book of the people's experience. According to Fernandez, the surest to prove a cultural contact between peoples is to adduce linguistic evidence. In his book titled The General History of Africa, the author claimed that one of the largest inhabitants of ancient Egypt was the Yoruba. Thus, more than 500 vocabularies can be deduced in the ancient Egyptian language, devoid of mixture of Greco and Roman Arab words. During the 1974 UNESCO Cairo Symposium, the peopling of ancient Egypt and the deciphering of the Maradic texts, Sheikh Anta Diop and Theophilo Obenga were among its participants. Continuing in the work of Diop, Obenga focused on linguistic demonstrations. Obenga criticized Joseph Greenberg's method, and based on the accepted fact that linguistics evidence is the means to establishing two or more peoples as being culturally related, he sought to prove that Egyptian and modern Negro African languages are genetically related. Based on morphological, lexicological and phonetic correspondence. Common earlier forms between the similar languages are able to be arrived. The ancient Egyptian language belonged to a language family that included the West and Central African. The label Joseph Greenberg gave the language is race-based, which also makes it unscientific. Jean-Claude Mbole says that the Yoruba did not get their language from the ancient Egyptians, but both languages stem from the same language family. The Yoruba history begins with the migration of an East African population across the Trans-African route leading from the Mid-Nile River area to the Mid-Niger. Archaeologists, according to M. Omoleya, informs us that the Nigerian region was inhabited more than 40,000 years ago, or as far back as 65,000 BC. The pre-existing group was visited by the Yoruba people between 2000 BC and 500 BC. This time period was known as the Bronze Age, a time of high civilization. This group of people was led, according to Yoruba historical accounts, by King Oduduwa, who settled peacefully. According to another oral tradition, Oduduwa migrated from the east. Him and his followers met with a pre-existing group already living in the region. Oduduwa met with the strong opposition of the pre-existing group and had to struggle for supremacy. Oduduwa and his followers defeated the group, which gave rise to the first dynasty of Ile-Ife. Oduduwa is linked to the first political system in the region. From a third-eye view, one can see the similarities between Oduduwa and King Narmer, who also struggled for supremacy, defeating the Scorpion King, which gave rise to the first Egyptian dynasty. Also, he can be compared to the last native pharaoh, Nektambo II. It is believed that after he was defeated by the Persians, he fled south into the interior of Africa.